This is a conversation with Paul Rosolie, explorer, filmmaker, author, and protector of the last corners of untouched wilderness on this planet. Paul has lived among elephants, seen tigers in the wild face to face, come across jaguars and 20-foot anacondas. He's about as close as it gets to Tarzan, living in the jungle for 2 decades. And he's the founder of Jungle Keepers, an incredible organization currently protecting 100,000 acres of pristine deep forest jungle and on a path to protect much more. This is where this conversation takes place. Hundreds of miles deep into the Amazon jungle, very much in Paul's element, and very much on the edge of the world.
Right now we are traveling up the Las Piedras River, which is the longest river in the Madre de Dios region of Peru. And the Madre de Dios region of Peru is in the Amazonian headwaters. And because of where it is and geographic isolation, it's one of the last parts of the Amazon to be reached by people. So it's still one of the wildest places on earth. And as we go up this river, if you were to keep going and going and going up this forest, you could go for weeks on end. It's basically one of the last places where wilderness is so extensive that it's almost an endless forest.
And this river here, this water that we're on right now, where does this water lead to?
This water leads up into the jungle and then will split into headwaters, into headwaters, into headwaters, and become tiny little streams somewhere deep inside of Alto Purus National Park. So really in human terms, if you started walking that way, or if you took a boat this way, there's nowhere to go. You don't come out on the other side. It's just jungle from here to the end.
And if we looked this way, and I'm just trying to get a picture of somebody who's like, all right, I'm picturing this in my mind. I'm picturing this jungle, this vast jungle. How far away are we from like the nearest person or the nearest community?
We're probably, the nearest thing is our base, right? And so we're probably 7 miles from our base. And that's, a 4-hour, 5-hour journey from the nearest town. So we're pretty far out there right now.
So not a lot of people come out here unless maybe they're coming out here to see you.
Unless people want to visit me, very, very few people come out here, except for a few local fishermen and loggers that want to try and get up to places where in the past they weren't able to go. And so now that they have diamond tip chainsaws and they have more funding, they can afford the gasoline and the better boats to get them deeper into the jungle to get the last really big trees.
What's different about this one? What's different when you get this deep into this jungle?
When you go to the jungle in Borneo, or you go to the jungle in India, you go to the jungle and there's jungle, but then there's always, you're in the jungle, but there's a road over here, or you're in a national park and there's pathways and roads, and it's sort of quantified and managed by humans. Or if you go to a national park, even Yellowstone, I feel like it's great that there's conservation there, but it's basically a giant outdoor terrarium where we know how many wolves there are, we know how many bears there are, we know exactly what the numbers of the elk and the deer and the thing. Everything is known, whereas this is completely unknown. And so this is one of the last places on earth where you have an ecosystem that's so wild that we don't even know what the population dynamics with the ecosystem within the forest are. We don't know where the uncontacted tribes are necessarily living. There's so much that we don't know about the medicines that are here. And so being on the border of true wild, Earth as it was 5 million years ago, to me, that's happiness.
Yeah. There's red macaws they're flying over.
Yeah, and so you've seen in the days you've been here that there's macaws everywhere on this river. And that's one of the things. Of the 16 species of macaws that are in Central and South America, most of them are endangered. Some of them are extinct. Spix's macaws went extinct in the wild at some point, and the last pair was sold for $70,000 to people in Europe. So wherever these macaws are, because they're brilliant and beautiful, people hunt them and they take their feathers, we destroy their habitat. They only nest in the ironwood trees, which is exactly the trees that the loggers want. So protecting the macaws is crucial because everywhere else, they're pretty much gone. My friends from Belize come down here and they can't believe how many macaws we have because this is wild jungle. And that illustrates the principle that as long as you don't cut it, as long as you don't degrade it, as long as you don't ruin it, nature will just keep producing bountiful amounts of wildlife, and this, the only time that is ever threatened is if we actually murder it.
Can you tell me about some of your experiences with animals down here? Like something, maybe an experience that really left an impact with you.
Well, the one I was telling Danny about the other day was, so JJ, we got lost. We got really lost in the jungle one day, and we came out late at night, and we were coming down the river, and JJ was driving, and as JJ's driving, you know, he's fully aware in his dark night, and he has his headlamp on, and he's checking from side to side of the river, and he just like, he hits the bottom of the boat. So I look back, and JJ just went like, Jaguar, and I went, where? And he was like, beach. And he cut the motor so that we came forward really quietly on the surface of the water. We landed on this beach and went right off the tip of the boat, and we ran straight up to this Jaguar, and we were 6-7 feet from this Jag, and she was caught in our headlamps looking at us, and we were shoulder to shoulder kind of holding on to each other, face to face with the Jaguar, and this Jaguar just looked at us, couldn't quite see past our lights, and then after some time, maybe about 30 seconds, she just went, there's no sound, I can smell something, but I can't see, I'm out. And she left, but we were face to face with the Jaguar. And that's the type of thing where it's just, you know, you're just lit after that.
Do you think that Jaguar had seen you before or seen people before?
Yeah, I think that Jaguar lives on that beach, and she's seen us all the time. I think she knows what we smell like.
Yeah, because they're just hyper aware of the entire environment.
They're hyper aware. And like our spider monkey troop, like we know them, like you start to get to know the animals. And then there's also a thing that the local people do where each species takes on a personality. So like you think of, you know, the harpy eagle. Oh, they always do this, they do this. Like JJ says, oh, the Jaguar, they don't like it when you see them. They feel so embarrassed. Or like, you know, you think of the personality of a wolf or a fox. And so here, when I see a pair of black skimmers going over the water, I'm like, oh, that's Mr. and Mrs. Skimmer. I'm like, hello. It's like, even if it's not the same pair, it becomes a species identity, and then you see your friends. There's just a whole wilderness of friends.
Do you see tapirs often?
You don't see tapirs often because they're very shy and they hang out mostly in the crepuscular hours, which is dawn and dusk. But they come out to the river. They love water. They love pooping in water. They don't like to poop out of water. So they love to come into the water and they poop. They can also go to the bottom of the river and they can walk along the bottom of the river, like super clandestine. And so they have this big thing of meat on their neck, big thick neck reinforced. So even if a Jaguar bites them, they can kind of bash them against a tree and try and fight them off. And a tapir's big like a cow. So that's our largest mammal here. So yeah, lots of tapirs here, but you don't see them a lot, especially when you're in a big group. Whoa.
So what is this that we're seeing?
That's a capybara. It's the largest rodent on Earth.
Wow, it's just right here in the river.
Yes, it is. That's interesting. So in a second, when we get a little closer, that capybara is gonna thunk, just gonna go underwater and disappear. And just like the tapirs, they're really good at, wow, that's incredible.
I mean, it's pretty big.
Well, this just shows you how far out we are, that the animals are acting like this.
And so this is the largest rodent in the world, right?
That is absolutely the largest rodent in the world. And in a second, she's gonna go whoop, right underwater.
Like it's the size of like, I don't even know what to describe it as.
A large dog?
Yeah, a large dog. Like I would even think.
And so look, the bird is trying to land. JJ, what birds land on them?
That's giant cowbird.
Giant cowbirds, right? They like to land on the capybara. Wow, so calm.
Wow. Unbothered.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You don't get animals calmly moving across the river like it's their world when there's a lot of humans. Like if this was a river that had a lot of boat traffic, there'd be people hunting those, they wouldn't be here. And then even if you had like a lot of tourism on the river or something, they would with all the boats going up and down, that sort of thing where the animals are acting naturally and just sort of, they notice us and they just get out of the way because that's what an animal does. That shows you that we're in deep jungle.
Tell me a little bit about your story about how you got here.
I was born in Brooklyn, and I grew up with a ton of environmental stress. I went to the Bronx Zoo when I was a kid, and they had, you know, the displays there. They had Jungle World, which was my favorite place. I loved it even as a kid. They did such a good job of recreating the jungle and the feeling of the jungle. And I was like, that's where I want to be. I want to go to the real thing one day. And I remember internalizing all of the, you know, they said elephants will go extinct in our lifetime. We're losing black rhinos. Gorillas are being crunched in Virunga National Park. They're going to go extinct soon. They showed videos of that roads allow loggers in and then trees go down and rainforests are disappearing. The rainforests only cover 6% of the world's land area and we're losing them rapidly. They could be gone in our lifetimes. And so I grew up crying myself to sleep every night because I was horrified by all of that. And then being dyslexic, being terrible in school, spending as much time out in nature as I could in like New York and New Jersey, doing solos and testing my field skills. And by the time I came here, I dropped out of high school and just tried to find the most remote, bare bones, authentic research position that I could. And I just wanted to get to the Amazon and also have no restrictions, not be on a tourist group, not be kept in any kind of confinement. And so when I met JJ was like, yo, where do you want to go? And I was like, out there. He's like, go. If you come back, you come back. If you don't, you don't. And I was like, that is what I've been waiting for my whole life. Guardrails and safety speeches and advisory warnings. Like, no, man, I want real life. No help coming. Like the real thing. I don't know. We're so cared for, and so there's something like even right now being out on a boat where if we flip our boat, it's going to take us a week to get back. If we didn't have a boat, it would take us forever to get back to civilization, trudging down the river. It's serious. And so that to me makes life more meaningful. I think there's something about the constant,
You have to have stakes.
You have to have stakes or it doesn't mean anything. Just like you got to have, lines in tennis. Otherwise, you're just whacking balls all over the place. It makes no sense.
I feel like when you're in the States and you're in some second-story apartment building, it can feel as if all the corners of the map where the dragons and the monsters live have kind of been mapped out and the adventures have been had. But like we're out here right now in somewhere where there's dense forest on either side.
Yes.
I mean, what do you think your message is, or your thing you would say if somebody was sitting across from you and you're like, hey, like, I don't know if that still exists today?
Oh, I think that's a really good misconception.
Yeah.
I think that's what that's what they want you to believe. I think that's part of them keeping you home, is saying there's nothing out there for you. It's already been explored. It's already been whatever. It's like, well, yeah, sure, but you go to Africa and all of a sudden you see how big it is, and that you could literally rent a car and go driving across tremendous areas of wilderness where there's elephants and lions and all this wild, and you can just go do that. Out in the Amazon, there's still an area almost the size of the continental United States that is still forest. All of that, different tribes, different ecosystems, it's all still out there. And so we live at a very exciting time in the sense that we can access all of that and that we can still protect it because a lot of it's in danger of being destroyed. And so I grew up first thinking that, where I was like, oh, well, if all the corners of the map have been mapped, then I was born in the wrong time and this is so sad. And then now I'm like, I was born exactly when I needed to be born, because instead of just exploring for explorer's sake, now we get to go out and we understand the value of these things. I think back 200 years ago, people were just like, that's a big jungle. It's crazy. It's, the green inferno. It's like, now we understand that this is our pharmacy. This is our genetic library. This is where all the species are. This is what's creating our weather systems and protecting us from hurricanes and making life on Earth possible. And so now we have that vision and we have that understanding, and so we can use it. And we have technology. We have the technology today with social media, the ability to actually reach everyone. I know people who are saving lemurs in Madagascar and working with black rhinos in Africa, and people who are documenting Sumatran tigers and trying to protect their habitat before it's taken over by palm oil. And so we're able to connect these dots and see that other people are doing important conservation work as well, which is encouraging. Because I grew up hearing everything's going to die. At the end of every nature documentary, they'd be like, these are beautiful penguins, or these are beautiful elephants. And they'd be like, but unfortunately, soon this will no longer be a sight. And it's like, fuck that. You're sitting in your living room and you're heartbroken. You just watch this amazing thing and they tell you it's going to die. And it's like, that's not a narrative that I'm okay with. So being out here and protecting these patches of forest and creating this corridor is changing that narrative. So instead of the Amazon is going to die, it's like, well, let's protect this part of it. And that's going to be between the national parks. That's a corridor. So now you have ecosystem connectivity. And so you've just changed the whole narrative. You've proved that it can be done. You've proved that loggers aren't bad guys. They're just friends you haven't met yet that could be conservation rangers. You're empowering the local people. You're improving the lives of their kids. So their kids are going to grow up in a culture of conservation and want to protect this and have that vision that, wow, I've grown up. My parents are always protecting this forest. I protect this forest. Our culture comes from this forest. We have fish in the river. We have everything we need in the forest. And so then you actually sort of fix the environmental problem. And if everybody does that around the world, people who are working on oceans and people who are working on forests, and you do that in all different places, it starts to be a very different reality we live in. Because the one that we're living in, where they tell you that, you know, climate change is happening and the ocean fisheries are collapsing and the rainforests are burning, and that's stressful. That doesn't lead to a healthy life. Hearing that we're living in the end of times is extremely unhealthy. It's part of that misconception that our time is unique. I think, you know, World War I, they must have gone, man, the world is going crazy. This is the worst time ever. And then World War II, they must have gone, this is the worst. Everybody's gonna die. Great Depression, the Dust Bowl. It's like everything, every generation has their reason that they're living through the end game. We're not living through the end game. I want to change that. It's like we have to start thinking. That's where I actually can get with the people that are like multiplanetary, where it's like, start thinking long term. Start realizing this is the only place that we have life. That's it. Let's start there. Because everyone's gotten real liberal with their alien conversations. They're like, oh, when the aliens come, where? Show me an alien. Show me a molecule of life outside of this planet. As far as we know, this is where there's life. Everything else, you're talking about Santa Claus. I don't want to hear it. You don't have any evidence. And so this is where we know that life is possible. We are as connected to this. We're literally the fish going, what is water? We have forgotten that this is where we come from, that we're going to drink water today. We are going to drink water and it's going to evaporate off of our skin. And then later when it rains, it's going to rain down. It's going to be back in the river and we're going to drink it again. And we're part of that cycle. And out here, you can actually see how connected to nature you are. I know it's difficult when you're in a city, but out here, you're reminded of those old truths.
This is one of, if not the single most biodiverse places on the planet.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting to think about like the value of life. Like if we think about the uniqueness of in the universe, whether or not there's aliens out there, or if there are, and they're like, there's other places that have gold. There's other places that have water. Mm-hmm. There's nothing, and there may be places that have things that look like trees.
Yeah.
But there's no trees. Like this evolved here for untold millions of years, and everything is just locked in. I think it's a kind of beautiful and interesting to think of it as like, in the entire universe, this is the only place that this exists in the way that it does.
Yeah, and I feel like everyone forgot that.
Yeah.
And everyone's talking about like, do we live in a multiverse? Like everyone just fucking lost their minds. Let's start with what we know. Like Darwin worked hard to like, we've gone through periods of scientific discovery to get to this point. And now we've all just gotten creative thinking happy, where everyone's like, what if we live in the Matrix? What if this is a simulation? It's like, maybe it feels like a simulation because you spend 19 hours a day on your computer with a headset on. It's possible. Because when you come out here and you bleed a little bit, it doesn't feel like a simulation. And so I just think it's, you know, I'll even push back against water. Where else is there water?
Well, I mean, there's water we don't know if there's standing water like this, but like water is on the Europa under the ice.
How far is that?
It's on the planet, it's on the moon of Jupiter.
So it's made up as far as I'm concerned. As far as what we
need
can
to
access,
touch it. You like the
if I
tangible.
can't touch it with my hands, if I can't see it, then, I mean, good luck getting to Europa. Europa?
Europa.
Europa. We haven't even gotten to Mars.
When you think about the people that inspired you, the great figures, the people close to you, but also the people that maybe a little bit more that you never met.
Yeah.
Who are like some of the people that stand out to you and why?
A lot of them are the conservation biologists. Like I grew up reading about Alan Rabinowitz, who was at the Bronx Zoo, and he was someone that grew up, I'm dyslexic, he grew up with a stutter, and so for a long time he couldn't speak. And so he identified with animals because he said they can't speak for themselves. And so he thought becoming a voice for the voiceless was important, and he made national parks, protected tigers, protected jaguars. Steve Irwin, obviously, if you don't like Steve Irwin, there's something, like I'm a little suspicious of people that don't like Steve. But I mean, that magnetism and enthusiasm where it's just like, I'm having fun and I'm gonna save these species, and that's exactly why I'm here and never looking back. That fire is the reason that, 20 years later, we're still like, Steve, man, like no one's gonna stop loving Steve. And so he was definitely an influence. Jane Goodall, the work that she did, the fact that she just went out there as a young 20-something blonde girl, went out into Africa, started living with killing machine chimpanzees, and went against the whole scientific community when they were like, you can't name them, you gotta just, and she was just like, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. And they were like, you're anthropomorphizing them. And she was like, comparing them to humans makes sense. They're practically us. And so she fought back against that, which sounds easy, but probably wasn't. And then ended up becoming one of the most revelatory and celebrated field biologists ever. And so that's, you know, she's kind of like a historical figure that's still alive.
Right.
You know?
And you met her.
Yeah, Jane's a friend, and Jane changed my life. And so yeah, that's an amazing connection to. That's a weird thing when you admire someone your entire life, and they're one of these monstrous, legendary things. It's almost like you don't think that you can. It's like a planet far away. You don't think it's something that is possible to reach, and then this person, you know, just says, "Cool work," and your whole world explodes, and you just go, well, great, that's enough encouragement to keep going for the next 20 years.
Did it change your perspective on her when you met her? Or was it similar before and after? Like, what was that experience like?
I think before, you see the Mother Earth side of Jane.
Yeah.
And she's very gentle, and it's about Mother Earth, and she's an old lady wearing a shawl. And what you don't realize is that she's a fucking general. She's at war. She knows that right now is the most important time in history. And so when she drops the public face and goes into strategy, she's talking about acres. She's talking about how are we gonna see. For her, she realizes that if you teach the kids to care about nature, you're gonna create an army of people that will fight for it. And so her thing now is educating kids, the next generation. Forget about us. We're going to the next generation. We have to remind them, because 50% of the people on Earth live in cities. They get their meat in plastic wrap. Their vegetables come from where? The store. You ask a kid that lives in the inner city, where does an apple come from? Have they ever seen an apple tree? Probably not. You know, have you ever seen the fact that what a chicken looks like before you eat it? Probably not. And so that disconnect is why people are losing their connection with nature. And they don't see, for me, I see every day, I drink the river and I go through this whole thing, and it's like going to church. You don't even need to go to church because God's flowing through you in the elements around you. There's truth in that. And so for someone like Jane, the thing that changes when you see her is how fucking tough she is. She's been traveling 300 days a year for the last 30 years. She's completely sacrificed her personal life or her quality of life to go meet people every day. And I think she does get joy out of that, but she's so committed to the vision, even at 90 years old, because she knows what's at stake. It's life on Earth. And that's encouraging to see someone with that kind of tenacity. It's, you know, it's like before D-Day, somebody going, no, we have to do this, and we can. Not just roll over and go, oh, well, it's too late, the world's burning, let's just go die.
I think that when you talk, especially when you talk about the future of this, there's a fire in your eyes. And I think when you think about the people out there, there's so many people that are like, they just want that. They want something to burn. They want that fire in your mind to be able to be like, how can I put all this heart and all this energy towards one thing? But sometimes people are like, hey, like, do I come out to the Amazon? Do I donate? Like, where are the action items for the everyday person?
Well, that's what we're trying to change. That's what we're trying to do with this. That creates a new framework. Is that traditionally conservation happens far away in, you know, protecting tigers in Indonesia, and you have no access to that. Here, we're connecting the indigenous local leaders who said that we have to protect this place with people all over the world. The reason we're able to protect 100,000 acres in the Amazon rainforest is because people all over the world, from the billionaire level down to the $5 a month level, have joined Jungle Keepers, have taken part in it. And I'm talking about moms that work 2 jobs giving us $5 a month, and they show their kids our content, and they explain that someone's saving the rainforest, and that's comforting for them. The fact that, well, this part of the world isn't burning. There's people out there who are making sure that it's gonna be okay. And so everyone does their part. And for the people that have the resources and they're putting in larger donations, well, same thing. They realize that we need a healthy world. That it's not good for business if ecosystems are collapsing and hurricanes are getting worse and people are freaking out and there's more depression and stress and disconnect from the environment. And so yes, we provide a way for people to authentically come out, to be travelers, not tourists, to take a part. So not everyone wants to leave their life and come live barefoot in the Amazon and you know, swim with the piranhas, but they can come try it out. They can come with us and sit on a boat, and we can show them how beautiful it is, and they can do it in a safe way, and then go back and actually become messengers, become part-time warriors for that, you know. And that's what a lot of people have done. A lot of the most important, a lot of the most influential people that have helped us have come here, seen it, looked around, and just gone, oh, this is, people don't know. And once they see it with their own eyes, like that scene in Jurassic Park, they go to Jurassic Park and they're like, oh yeah, you said you have a theme park. They're like, whatever. And then with the first time they see the dinosaurs, they stand up and the music hits and they get it. They go, holy shit, there's dinosaurs. This is Avatar. There's jaguars and anacondas and there's spider monkeys and there's butterflies, there's clouds of butterflies. There's all this intense ecosystem happening. And in a dark, cold universe where there's fucking nothing, we have this explosion of life that's at this climax community. In the entire fossil record, there's never been a greater proliferation of terrestrial biodiversity than this. And we're alive at a time when it's not something that's in the history books. We're alive at a time where we can still protect the original thing. That's incredible.
When coming down here, my experience is that it's very raw. And that I think that it's interesting, like before coming down, sometimes you think of it as like, you know all the stories, like the dangers, and you almost in your mind have a list of the dangers. Yes. But like we were neck deep in piranha water, and you grabbed onto this huge catfish with spikes hanging out of it, and you wrestled it away from a caiman, and so we're in the water with this fish and the piranhas, but you don't feel fear, right? Or at least I don't think, like, we're the whole group of people, and maybe you're aware, and I'm not saying that there aren't moments of fear, but there's a moments of like awe, right? And like as long as you're with the right people doing the right way and you're being safe, so much of those same experiences that when you tell the story sound like heart pumping, like it's like almost like danger. It's really more like, this is incredible. Like, what are we looking at here? This is real life. It feels as if you're inside of a nature documentary.
and that's fun. I really enjoy looking at seeing the people comments on YouTube and stuff where people just don't believe anything I say.
Yeah.
That's complimentary to me, because when people don't believe you, it means that it's something incredible. And being able to bring people down here and share experiences like that with them, where you go, we're gonna jump into the Amazon River at night with the crocs and the stingrays and the piranhas and the anacondas, and it's gonna be fine. And we're gonna float down the river at night, and giving people that sort of thing that you can't access, you can't have anywhere else. And a lot of times it's because the river isn't wild enough. There isn't all this wildlife. It's not exciting to go down a river that flows next to a city that's polluted, that there's no wildlife. Like, there's no reason for that. But when you're in this pure environment, you're in clean water, and there's beautiful wildlife, and there's things to discover.
Right.
The dragons are still out there. Then you have an opportunity to give people something that they can't get anywhere else, which is real adventure. And I think that people are so starved for that. And there is a sort of leftover sadness that people feel over the fact that they're told that you just can't have it.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day. I think even back hundreds of years ago, there's somebody sitting in whatever the big city was, London, and they're like, all the adventures have been ventured, and meanwhile somebody is out there,
somebody's doing it,
right? And so it's less about the world and more about where you put yourself and who you surround yourself by.
Well, it's like that. What's that? There's like an entrepreneur quote where they're like, stop complaining because somebody less qualified than you has the job of your dreams. Yeah. And it's like, dude, you just have to go do it. And that's what I respected so much about Steve, was he didn't plan on being Steve Irwin. He was just out catching crocodiles. That's what he did, because he loved crocodiles. And so there's something also about that, where if you do what you love, you're so programmed to go in that direction that you're going to go in that direction. And so that's, if you're smart enough to choose to do the thing that you love, you'll just do it. There's that story where somebody said to Clapton, or one of the other great guitar legends, I'd give anything to play guitar like you. And he went, no, you wouldn't, because I gave it 8 hours a day for the last 20 years. That's how I learned this. And it's like, what it really costs is that passion. But like you said, most people have jobs and a life, and maybe they have their own passion, but maybe nature is something that really inspires them. Well, it doesn't need to consume your whole life. That's the thing. That's what's so much fun about creating the opportunity for people to come down here and get to see this.
I want to talk about something that you touched on, which is that, not everyone has equal opportunity, and particularly when you're growing up.
Yeah.
Like I also grew up dyslexic, which was like, when I was young, was really hard.
Really hard.
Because you feel you feel dumb, Like, I remember the worst part about it for me was reading out loud in class. And I was
terrible.
old enough where I really should be able to read,
Yeah.
like, perfectly, but like I'm gonna mispronounce that word, or I'm not gonna get that one, and then it's like super embarrassing. And so I don't know if you had this experience, but for me,
Same experience.
it was like, all right, you basically have to develop a sense of humor because you got to laugh your way through something where it's like, oh, actually, you know what, I do know, or I'm kidding, or I'm tongue in cheek. And
Yeah, it's hard to hide though.
it is hard to hide.
I was
mean, they know.
petrified of that.
They know.
Yeah, they know.
But then now, today, like, you've done something, and there's work to be done, but you've done something a lot of people would be like, hey, like, I would love to do that.
Yes.
And so if you were to talk to some kid right now who is like, I don't know, in the 7th grade, and they're like dyslexic, and they're like, I don't know if I'm gonna, like, college is right for me, I don't know what I'm gonna do, I don't know what the thing is.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I would say figure out what you love and get around people that are good. Those are the 2 most important things, because finding good people, I've seen good people go after an opportunity and end up in a room with bad people. I've seen kids come out to organizations that claim to be volunteer research organizations in the Amazon and get scammed. I've seen, so truly finding good people is key. Because you might go find your heroes doing work out in some remote jungle or on a boat out in the middle of the ocean, and you might find out that they're total pieces of shit. You don't know, you know? I've had that happen a few times where people that I really admired, I didn't admire them after I met them. And so surrounding yourself with good people that are nurturing and that'll give you a chance is important. And also, if the people that you're trying to get with are really doing work that's that admirable, they're probably very busy. And so you're gonna need to have that tenacity, that thing to keep going. Somebody messaged me a while back and said, oh, my dream is to work with great white sharks. I want to be a marine biologist, but so does everybody else. And everybody wants to work with great white sharks, and it just doesn't seem, how do I crack in, and, you know, how do I make a way for myself? And I said, go to the dock of the place where the biologists go to study sharks. And they're gonna say you can't get on the boat, but be there every day. Just go live there. Carry their stuff for them on a tough day. Offer them something. Take a few pictures of them that help them promote their work. Help them with their mission. And then do that for 15 years. You know, one thing I also see people, they go right away, they go, I want to start an organization. I want to start and it's like, you should start by following someone who's doing it. Follow a leader. So like when I came down here, I got trained by JJ I'm still getting trained by JJ. And so like I think that having humility when you start out, I think that humility, finding what you truly love, at the same time, don't listen to anyone that tells you no. Because everyone told me, don't go to the Amazon, you should go get a PhD first. I would have been 28 by the time I got here. With dyslexia, I never would have gotten my PhD. I failed Bio 101 in college. Couldn't do it. But if you're truly going after something that has value, and you find good people and you refine your skills. And so for me, it was wilderness. For me, it was being out in the wild, camping, navigating, tracking animals. I was doing that when I was 11 years old. I grew up watching the real version of White Fang, the one that actually has wolves and bears in it, not animated. And I grew up watching that, and then I grew up watching Legends of the Fall. So like, and I would go to summer camp, and I would go out on my own, and I would do solo expeditions. By the age I was 12, I'd have a knife on my side, I'd bring a steak and my golden retriever, and we'd go camp in the woods by ourselves, and I'd go find my adventures. And I had some great adventures. We'd go find bears and whatever else. And you can do that wherever you live. But then by the time I got here, I had that prerequisite knowledge that when JJ was like, all right, we're going. And it's like, you already know some of the things that you need to know. You know how to take care of yourself and get through a night in the wild. You know how to navigate a little bit. You can keep up. And so that was really, really important. But then he opened up the masterclass of, okay, now I know the trees. I can identify the birds. I can tell you what birds are here by the calls of the sound of I can tell you where the peccary not only are, but where they're gonna be. You know, he was, you know, whatever we're seeing, he's seeing the Matrix in its original code. He's on a level that we can't even imagine, because he grew up here.
Tell me more about that relationship with JJ. How did you guys meet?
I came down as a research volunteer, and my job was to sit on the side of the river in the bugs and take data on how many macaws there were and what the weather was, and if any vultures flew over and the macaws flew away, and just basic data on the macaws. How many were there? How many came down to the lick? What was their behavior? And from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. every day, that was what I had to do. In exchange for doing that, I got to play the rest of the day. And so that for me was just going, JJ, what's this? JJ, what's that? And I think for him, he'd grown up indigenous, and so a lot of his brothers and a lot of his friends interacted with in the jungle in a different way, where it's kind of, yeah, it's the jungle, we grew up here, so if I can't shoot it and if I can't cut it, then I'm not interested in it. And so I think for JJ, what I offered him was the type of friendship where it was like, let's go see where this stream goes. Let's just go see where this, because nobody knows where this stream goes. And so we do things like go explore a stream for 2 days. And nobody else was willing to put in the hard work it takes to have that much fun. Because having a lot of fun takes really hard work. And whether that's surfing big waves or going on an expedition to camp in the middle of the Amazon or whatever it is, you got to deal with your gear and you got to deal with your fuel and you got to make a plan for food. And it's hard work to have serious fun. And JJ was like, let's put hard work into this. He went, you catch snakes, and I was teaching JJ snakes, and he was teaching me the other 99% of the jungle, because he knows everything, and I knew about one thing, and the only thing he wasn't familiar with was snakes. So as I started to teach him snakes, he started to go, well, let's go bigger. Let's go bigger. Have you ever caught an anaconda? I said, no. I said, have you ever touched an anaconda? He said, no, but we've seen them by the side of the river in this one place. So then we made a whole expedition to go see the anaconda. And through this whole period, I'm 20, 21, 22, everyone back home is going, why do you keep going to the jungle? What are you doing down there? And I'd be like, we're working on something, trust me. But for years, I had my friends and family thinking that I was sort of just wasting my time or just enjoying myself. Like, it wasn't clear, because we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just following the bearing of our inspiration, and that's all we had. And so, yeah, I'm not a good example to follow. Don't listen to a word I say.
Yeah, well, I mean, all the people that are worth following tell you, don't follow me.
Don't follow me. It's terrible.
You know.
Yeah, it's a stupid thing to do.
I mean, we're talking about the Kitchen Confidential, the Anthony Bourdain book. And I mean, I think about Anthony Bourdain, for me at least, like there's certain elements of that are super inspiring, but he lived like a really hard life.
Well, yeah, if you're a kid and you want to be like, I want to be the next Anthony Bourdain, it's like start with some heroin, smoke a pack of cigarettes.
Right.
You know, like go work in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And it's like, so don't actually try to emulate those people. Don't actually try to emulate me. Like coming down with no job, no plan, no security, and just spending years and years and years down here. I think what people see is they see me holding a toucan or catching a big anaconda and don't realize it took 6 months of work to catch that anaconda. It took 20 years of living and working with JJ and living here and developing the local contacts and understanding the jungle to the point that we know where to look for the last dragons. And so that 20 years will cost you having any kind of money or a house or security, and you got to burn through your first marriage, and you got to pay the price if you want to have these sort of things. If you want to reach your dream, you better be playing guitar 8 hours a day, and you're not going to have time for other stuff. And so you got to be willing to sort of pay the piper on that one. And I think that's what a lot of people starting out don't realize, and that's fine because that's what weeds out the.
Right.
You know, they said, what's that thing about that the brick walls aren't the closed doors, they aren't there to stop us, they're there to keep out all the people that don't want it bad enough.
It's like the moats around the castle.
Yeah.
Something that I've noticed in the quiet moments here is the dedication, the relentless dedication. But with that, it's not all easy, right? Like sometimes there are human moments. Sometimes there is failed marriages or moments when you're sad. And out here, you have a community, but you're also like, you're not going to drive back to your parents' house and be like, hey, like it's something tough's happening in my life. When you're out here and you're dealing with that suffering, what's that like?
Well, because you start out, you're a kid and you have parents and you live in a normal place. And so now that there was a period where it was like, this is sort of taking off, but we still weren't sure. I was always, the joke is my grandmother would always tell me like, when are you going to get a job? Get a nice job. She goes, I know people at the post office. It's a good job. And she would try to tell me I needed a job at the post office. But there was always that thing of like, what's my plan B? What happens if I get to 28 and I'm still poor and still living out in the jungle and we haven't become jungle keepers? And what if it all just falls apart? What's my plan B? And so that was really scary. And then the things didn't start to work until I cut the cord on plan B. Until you that saying was, if you're not willing to lose sight of the shore, you won't be able to cross an ocean. And it's like until you just say, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. It takes years. Everything takes a long time. It takes a long time to realize that this is the right place. you know? I didn't just arrive here. I came here, I went to Borneo, I went to Brazil, I checked all the different rainforests of the world. And I went, this is the place. This is where I have a JJ. This is where I see the wilderness that matters to me. But then further down the line, you know, as I was getting to 28 or 30, you start going, I think the only way to do it is to do it 100%. And then I got scared. I got scared at the start of COVID. I got scared that I didn't have a job. I didn't have savings. I was going through a divorce. I didn't have any support. We didn't have funding, nothing. And then at that time, I called my friend Mosa and I said, I quit conservation. It's been a great, 13 years. We tried as hard as we could. We had some wild adventures. I'm gonna go get a job. And he was like, don't ever say that to me again. He was like, I'm not even listening to you. And I had made the decision in my head. I was done. I had put in all the effort I could put in. And then a few days later, the phone rang. And it was Dax Da Silva, the founder of Lightspeed. And he said, how much would your ranger program cost? How much would it cost to actually fund jungle keepers for like the next 5 years? And we gave him that budget and he said, let's go. And so 5 days after I finally lost sight of the dream and blew out the candle, that's when things happened. And so it was very, very strange. But now you sort of have to just, if you're given the gift of having the opportunity to do what you always dreamed of doing, you have to do it all the way. And so that is a responsibility. And you do have to deal with being away from your friends and family, and you do have to deal with whatever else the cost is. I mean, I've had every tropical disease you could think of. I've been bitten by every kind of animal. My body is just scars of caiman and tiger and snake bites and all kinds of things all over my hands. But those are all great stories. Right. And I don't regret any of them now. So, and now we actually have this chance. All of any suffering that happened along the way led us to a point where we can now protect this forest. And JJ and I have been together long enough that, I've watched him go through some very severe versions of that cost of life, sort of the normal life, right, being ripped away from you as you pursue this dream and never deviate from it. And so we've both sort of gone through the same thing where we've had to pay dearly for it. But now that we're at this place, what's happened now is that we have the opportunity to do something that's never been done before. Connect people to conservation, change the narrative of destruction, and actually make a future where we can start doing this again and again and again and start just making it possible to literally save the world.
There's been a few times that we've been on this trip where you've been like, told us a story or get off a phone call and you're like, this person, when they experienced the Amazon or when they heard the story, they started crying. Yeah. Like it was like palpable, right? Yeah. When you're trying to cultivate that, yeah, like what do you have to do to make that happen, but make that happen in a way that really drives people, inspires them, and drives this movement? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because last night I'm working on a video that explains what Jungle Keepers does and explains our mission, and JJ brings in the video and he goes, when I came to this river, and he has this moment where he goes, and this place, and you see him thinking about it, and every time he says in this place, I choke up. Every time. And if it's hitting me that way, then I know it's going to hit other people that way. And so that honesty and authenticity coming out of JJ as someone who spent his entire life fighting for this river hits you right in the chest. And so when I go, oh, that's it. And so that's the rule. It's just like a song. If you hear a song and you go, man, I gotta get this on. I gotta go driving and listen to this loud. It's like, well, then you know it's a good song. Right. Everyone's gonna know it's a good song, and that's cool because everybody knows what quality is. Everybody knows what, and so that's what we try to do. Is I can feel it when I put something together. And I go, I'm watching it, and it's just not working for me this way. It's like you can just, but man, when you hear JJ talking about why he protects the forests. Yeah, it hits you hard.
So let's imagine for a minute here that in the world where somebody who has millions of dollars, mm-hmm, donates a big chunk, they feel inspired, they're like, this is what needs to happen. They bring in their friends, they bring in the 34 million. Sure. You raise the 34 million. What does the next 5 years look like? Mm-hmm. What do you guys do? And then what does that lead to?
Well, first of all, that person's gonna have a national park named after them. Second of all, we have to then go into hyperdrive, because what we're doing now is racing against time, because the loggers are going into areas and then we go in and negotiate with them to buy that land. Loggers go into new areas and we go try and rescue that land. So we're always rescuing something that's already happening. What we need to do now is proactively protect all of the deep jungle that's out there, make the corridor, and then we start doing exciting things like launch scientific research. we should probably have an HBO series about the formation of this because it's pretty special. So we have to start all these projects as well as continue to develop the community programs. Right now we have a mini ranger program where we have the loggers that we've turned into conservation rangers. Well, we're teaching their kids how to be rangers. So we're going to have local people with jobs and medical benefits. You're improving the lives of the entire region. So, rising tide lifts all boats. So if we get this, we establish this huge thing, and then it becomes a framework that you can export, and we can be protecting rivers in the Congo, other parts of the Amazon. There's probably indigenous cultures that could look at this as a playbook and go, oh, this is how we could do it. And we can go help them and consult on that. And then this starts to become, the research that's going to come out of here, the medicines, the new species, the numbers on how much biodiversity is here, it's all going to start exploding. It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many different little things that add together. There's the animals, you mentioned the DNA library, or help me understand the amount of medicine, the amount of potential in terms of the scientists going in here and pulling little things out. And
I mean, the pharmacy aspect of this, this is where the first cure for malaria came from. That big white tree that's behind you right now, that's Ohe, that will absolutely cure you of all stomach parasites if you drink its sap. It can also murder infections. JJ can cure ear infections. They have any ailment you have, there's a sap for that. And it's not like you have to believe in it for it to work. This is real chemical medicinal compounds that make sense in Western medicine that are flowing through the barks of these trees and in these plants. And so these are discoveries waiting to happen. And for people to think it's all been explored, 50% of the life in a rainforest exists in the canopy. The canopy is 150 feet up. No one has access to the canopy. A few scientists have gone and done some very preliminary work, but most of the canopy of the Amazon rainforest and rainforests around the world haven't been explored in a meaningful way, in a comprehensive way. So based on just what we have so far, you say, okay, well, if 2% of the canopy has been explored and we've come up with this many medicines, well then by default, the other 98%, once we start having access to that, we're going to discover new medicinal compounds that are going to allow us to launch forward with healthcare. It's going to change everything. We have to remember that while we're reaching for the stars, we can't burn our houses, and this is where we're from. This is why life on Earth is possible, right here. This is it. This river will flow across South America and go out to the Atlantic Ocean. If you put a tennis ball in the river right here, it'll go to the Atlantic Ocean 5,000 miles from here, which that's as the crow flies. If you go by the river, that's probably like 12 or 20,000 miles from here. But
if we bring it back to the playbook for a second, I think there's a lot of people who would say this is incredible, that they would love to do this. But there's a question that's is it possible? And so it'd be helpful to just, what are some of the things that you think makes Jungle Keepers unique and special and that represents the elements of this playbook that when they get the money and when this gets turned into a park are going to be the elements that you bring to other places?
Well, I think that the first thing, and when I started out, I was very insecure because I thought, I'm not a PhD in conservation biology.
Right.
But then I had conservation biologists reaching out to me going, wow, you've spent so much time living with the locals. That's cool. And I realized that was a huge asset, that what we've brought to Jungle Keepers is that this is really indigenous led. We support, and I'm a mouthpiece, and we have experts, and we have a board of directors that runs these projects. But at the heart of it, this is local people protecting their own forest. So that's the first thing. We're not people from somewhere else coming in and trying to do some sort of foreigner project. We're helping the local people. They said we have to protect the river.
Right.
They're the ones with the vision. And so I think that's key number one, because there's no one size fits all for conservation. It's going to be different in Africa and Australia and the Amazon. Need water.
There's drinking water straight out of the...
Las Piedras.
So we took a little break, but now we're back.
We've made progress.
Paul, I would love it if you could tell us a story about one of the big expeditions that you've been on.
Well, one of the most important ones I ever did was I wanted to test my skill in the jungle, and I've been learning from JJ for a long time. So I started doing solo expeditions, and the first solo expedition I did was probably about 4 days. And so you get a taste of being in the jungle, and it's amazing how much the jungle can kick your ass in 4 days. It's incredibly humbling just right now, if we couldn't get out of this sun for the next 6 hours, if you're stuck walking down the river, the environment dictates what you can and can't do, and your life changes. And so we're in a city, and and you have cement and you have planes and you have people and systems, you can do whatever you want because so much is set up for that. When you're in the jungle, you have your machete and your compass and you have your brain, and that's it. And so you go out with a plan and then nothing happens like that. And so I built up with a few solos, and my biggest one was about 10 days. It took me several days just to reach the start of it. You know, it takes you a week just to get to the point where you're at the last place a human lives, and then you go further and get dropped off far up a river. And my plan was to cross to another tributary and then come down on the pack raft. And I spent days just all by myself, walking up beaches, moving up the water. You know, you put your backpack over your head, you walk up the water, and at night you set up your tent. And in those places you see wildlife acting in such a way, kind of like what we saw with this capybara today, where, you know, the jaguars on those places, the jaguars will be sitting out on the beaches, just looking at their river. There's no one else. And so you just get this incredible sense of the power of nature. It's like being deep out in the ocean. But for me, being separated from humans is almost like a hallucinatory experience, because we're born into a room full of people. You're around people your whole life. You've been conversing and interacting every day of your life, pretty much, most people. And then to suddenly cut that off, you're on a whole different operating system. It's just you, and it can be definite. And so then you have to deal with you and be out there, and that's incredible. And then that's where having a relationship with the forest comes important, because then when you see, you're like, oh, there's my friends, the skimmers, and like, oh, there's jaguar tracks here. And the animals are a source of friendly companionship, because you're like, okay, this is friendly forest. I know how this guy does this. I know how these do this. I know where I can fish, and you can kind of manage it. And then the takeaway I got from it was, as incredible as it was, the dream of going into deep jungle, I had so many experiences that we were such a social species. You want to share them with somebody. Mm-hmm. It's more fun for me and JJ to go on an expedition together and have those stories to talk about than to go out. It's very lonely, very, very quick, I think.
What kind of things do you see up there? All kinds of animals and...
Yeah, I mean, when I was out there, the river that I was on, I saw huge black caiman that were, 16, 17 foot long crocodiles. I didn't see any large anacondas when I was out by myself, but I saw smaller ones, and they wrapped up by the side of the beaches. And so that river the higher you go, it gets narrower. Mm. And so as you're walking up, it gets shallower and narrower. And so each beach on either side is very close to you. And so you start seeing all the birds, all the caiman, all the cat tracks, the tapirs come out on the side. And so you get to see, it's almost like a Serengeti of the Amazon. It's different than this. We're looking around right now and there's just a few birds, but like all the other animals would be out interacting and doing things if there was no human presence on this river. Mm. And so getting to see that was very, very cool, because you realize how far the baseline has shifted from completely pure climax ecosystem that is untouched to a place where the animals are used to seeing boats and used to being shot at. And so around the world, I think that people really forget how, I think that's what it allowed me to do, is to bring back sort of this almost, so we have this thing called generational amnesia, where, whatever we tell our kids, we'll say, oh, this river, used to be so great. And then, they made farms down there and they cut a road, and, now it's a little less wild. You don't see jaguars as often. And like our kids will be like, oh yeah, like Dad said, there's not that many jaguars here, but they're still kind of around. And then they put up a few stores and complexes and some more roads, and the farmers, and they hunt out the jags. And then the next generation will say, oh, there used to be jags here. And so you see that in India, where I'll go to India and they'll say, oh, there used to be tigers in this region. Back in Grandpa's attic, there's a tiger skull back there. And it's like, oh, okay, used to be, not anymore. And so it's important for me that we remember the caliber at which ecosystems originally existed, and there used to be, at Teddy Roosevelt, there used to be sea lions or seals out, in New York, and there used to be turtles, and humpback whales have come back because the waters have gotten cleaner. But as we deteriorate ecosystems, we push the dragons and the amazing things further and further away. Whereas if we lived, even in cities, if we lived more in harmony with nature, we could have the other creatures we share this planet with closer. Mm. And to me, that's, I think, a lot of the loneliness that we feel as a species, and again, a lot of that depression, do we live in a simulation type of thing, is people have lost touch with the systems that keep us alive, and the fact that there are so many other intelligent animals out there living lives on this planet. It's like you would think we're the only things on this planet. It's very strange. And so being surrounded by all the wildlife and all of that nature at that caliber I feel like I have that now, and I carry that with me, and that makes me better at explaining why it's so important to protect the rainforest.
When you're out there by yourself for long times, how do you know when to turn around?
I don't know. The rule is I don't listen to myself. The rule is I make a plan and I stick to the plan, unless something happens like a catastrophic injury, or in the case of the longest solo I did, I came around a bend and I saw uncontacted tribes, instantaneously ran for my life, inflated my pack raft, went downriver and got out of there. Because for them, for me, for everybody, you have to pull the parachute. There's no way. You can't go near them without putting everyone's life in danger. And then at that point, the only thing that I cared about was, seeing my family again, getting back. And then it became incredibly clear thought at that time. I said, there's no reason for this. We should go home.
Yeah.
It's like when you're on the top of Everest and a storm blows in, you go, okay, the mountain's not important. The mountain was me the whole time. Go home. You sort of get the answer you need when you have a gun against your head.
Right, when there's no other option.
Yeah.
You have to get out of there.
Yeah.
God, that must have been terrifying. Did the adrenaline kick in, or was it fear at first?
No,
and
it was
fear
just
later?
pure fear, because the stories that you hear of people getting shot are so brutal, and they don't care. They just don't have, they don't have laws.
Right.
They don't have rules. So really, if they feel like it, they'll just kill you. If they're a little spooked, they'll just kill you. So I just thought, if I have time, they're still a few hundred meters away, go. And I went as hard, fast as I could, just ran as far as I could, which running in jungle doesn't really work. So I got the pack raft out very, very quickly. And then you can make good progress on a river. You cover distance quick. But then even when I stopped, I'd be on the beaches and I'd put my tent out and I'd try and sleep at night. And I would just have nightmares that they were showing up in the night. So I couldn't sleep. So the whole expedition was over.
Right.
I had reached
Reach an edge.
far surpassed my threshold of fear. I'd reached the absolute edge of that. And so at that point, it was just get me home, get me home, get me home, get me to another human.
Right.
Get me back to a human I can communicate with. That was a big thing. So even just like the first people that I found were poachers who actually had just shot a jaguar.
Yeah.
And I came up on these guys in the pack raft and I interacted with them, and they said, "Oh, we just shot this jaguar and we think it's up in the bushes just there, and the land went up and there was kind of a cave and we were all looking for this jaguar." Right away they were just like, "Help us hunt jaguars." "What's up, kid? Help us shoot animals."
Why were they hunting the jaguar? Like for the pelt?
They didn't explain that. They just saw a jaguar and shot at it, and then once they shot at it, they wanted to get it. And I ended up face to face with this jaguar because she was hiding in this hollow in the cliff. And I moved aside some vegetation. I came face to face with her, and she just looked at me. She looked at me straight in the eyes, and she was panting, and there's a little bit of blood by her side. And you could just interspecies. She just went, "Please no." And I just put the plants back. I went, "Not over here. Let's go over there." And we just left her over there. So she was injured. I don't know if she was going to make it, but at that moment, I helped her to not get found by the people hunting her. So that was after being as scared as I could be. I was as brokenhearted as I could be, and then it was just raft back for a few more days, get back to town, and then.
I'm sure that jaguar will always remember you.
I hope so.
Somewhere out there's a jaguar just thinking of Paul.
She's still out there.
Yeah. One of the things I think is interesting is that some things that you think are dangerous, you really don't worry about much.
Yes.
And some things that are dangerous are maybe dangerous, but they're way out. I think people worry about the wrong things when they think about the Amazon.
Like piranha.
Piranhas.
Like
exactly.
we can go swimming and do whatever the hell we want in this river, and there's no piranha that are going to hurt us.
Yeah.
However, if you get a lake in the jungle where the vegetation is overtaking the lake and it's kind of compressing and the lake's about to die and it's the dry season and the piranha are savage and hungry and they haven't eaten in months,
right?
And then you jump in, then it's dangerous. So it's kind of like telling an alien that just got to Earth, they'd be like, "Do I need to worry about lightning right now?" It's like, no, not right now.
But
You're
if
safe.
it happens.
But it could happen.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing with the jungle is sometimes also people don't realize it could happen. So the streams here, we walked up a stream and I was, we're just walking through this stream and the sandy bottom and it's clear and you could see it. Great. Me and JJ once stopped at a stream and we were camping and I got in the stream to swim and we pulled a 7-foot electric eel out.
Yeah.
And they can kill you. And then we found another electric eel and then we found 2 stingrays and we were just like, this stream? This was like the river Styx. It was like, we got to get out of this stream. This one's haunted, has all the worst shit living in it. No. And so you got to be careful. It's not every place the same.
So just this one that we're in right now, we have piranhas, caimans,
Piranhas,
anaconda,
caiman,
maybe somewhere.
anacondas. There's anaconda here.
Big. I mean, the fish you saw the other night, the catfish,
Yeah, sure.
spines this big on it.
Yeah, it had knives on its side. Knives with knives on them, serrated knives as pectoral fins.
Yeah.
And then you have the sungaro negro that's longer than me or you. And then you have the piranha, and then you have the stingrays, and you have the anacondas. But all of those animals just want to do their thing. As a human, we're kind of, they don't want to deal with us. There's not a single animal here that wants to hunt a human. You know, if you go to like a savanna where there's lions, you could get eaten by a lion. They would be interested in eating you. Nobody here wants to eat you. No jaguar's ever tried to eat me.
Well, let's hope that we can keep it that way.
Hope so.
Paul, this has been awesome. It's awesome talking to you.
You too, man.
Let's. I'm gonna jump into this water.
Let's go. How shallow are we? Who knows?
Very shallow.